And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And if you're new here, welcome. We're going to be doing some deep trance channeling in just a few moments. And it's a pretty cool little corner of the internet to be here with us. So, welcome to the show if you're back. We're glad you're back and enjoying the content. And I think we're going to be jumping into some really exciting stuff today. Last time we talked about, and we've been getting really deep into dream bodies. And Kris was breaking down some of the different layers and different functions of the dream bodies and how we use those to navigate different layers of reality and bring them back to our current perspective. So, pretty cool stuff. Yeah. And if you want more of that, get over to the website and sign up for the newsletter so you're getting updates on the show and different things that Serge and Kris are up to. So I'd encourage you to check that out. The link's below. And Serge, we'll pass it over to you.
Hey Dan, nice to be back. And we had a nice little discussion beforehand. And who knows, maybe some of that'll spill into the discussion with Kris or whatever he's got in his mind. Well, I guess we'll find out. Um, and I do want to point out that even though we do it only like once a week or something like that overall, um, I can, in my mind, I wish we could do it every day because I know it's very enjoyable. It's a lot of nice discussions and interactions. And it's kind of nice to get insights from Kris's perspective, points of view, or whatever you want to call it. Um, it can shed some light in a way we don't expect.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some awesome sessions. I know it is interesting as I was talking about the the topic from last time. I'm realizing that how much it was connected to the last session. So that's really cool.
So I guess we could get the show on the road as they go.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. So let's break a leg. Now we trust that you are comfortable
Yeah, that's Kris.
and we thank you for your consideration, as well as the consideration of our viewers.
All right.
Perhaps on some way, the viewers think they are only viewing this video on YouTube. They are hearing some words, and yet they may not necessarily appreciate yet that they too are integral to the creation of these exchanges. By viewing the resulting video, they are participating. They are influencing the exchange, whether they recognize it or not. This, in fact, does not bear on whether we have an exchange or not, but it does make it far more interesting because their own thoughts, or at least some of them, their own ideas, or at least some of them, perhaps even their own impressions, or some of them, may find their way into the discussion in some form. Just as many people have pointed out when we do our regular Monday night discussions, that throughout the day or a few days before, they had some fleeting thoughts, some vague ideas cross their mind, only to hear ourselves presenting it in some way during the Monday night discussion. So there are bleed throughs, some crossovers of consciousness at one level or another in most fascinating and interesting ways. So if the viewer recognizes some of these little incidences, it would certainly be nice if they made a comment to that effect. And it doesn't mean that there is some kind of great psychic or mystical power at work. It just means that in terms of consciousness, there is an interrelationship with all things, even at the layer of thoughts. There is an interrelationship. So this eventually spills over into these discussions. And that can lead to some fascinating areas of introspection. But please feel free to begin.
Well, I know last time, Kris, we were talking about dream bodies and how we would use those to navigate. Kind of the dream bodies would help us get glimpses of what's happening of other realities, and that would inform our experience, that we're having, perhaps physically. And yeah, so I thought that was a really interesting topic. And I know you've maybe even mentioned it in the past too. We were talking prior to the show about whales, and an interesting thing that you've said it, and I think Joseph said it earlier, as the keepers of dreams. So I wonder if that might be something that we could weave in
Hmm.
with the metaphor of
Definitely,
that. No.
definitely. For instance, in relation to various dream bodies, you have a similar experience at the physical level. If you want to go deep sea diving, you cannot go unless you have the proper equipment. You have to have scuba diving gear. You have to have oxygen tanks, and so on. If you want to go into outer space, you also have to don the proper attire, what you may call a spacesuit with a helmet and oxygen and so on, so that you can function in that environment. In this way, you use different kinds of bodies to maneuver and manipulate energy in various types of environments. So when you explore various layers of dream time, you may not necessarily notice it right away, but depending on the kind of dream stream you are going to be exploring, you don a specific kind of dream body that enables you to function in that environment. In a similar manner, you have to put on a spacesuit if you are going to go into deep space. So if you are going to go into particular depth of dream time, you need a kind of body that allows you to maneuver in that environment. At least that which relates to your ego perceptions. This is very important. Similarly, your experience of the whales in your dream, Joseph's experience in his dream of long ago, that also represents a particular kind of energy body that enables you to dive into the depths of your own dream experiences. How it ends up being deciphered or sorted out at the conscious level may be another story. But the bodies, the dream bodies in these instances are represented as whales so that you can actually dive deep. Whales are known to dive into the greatest depths of the ocean. In this way, a representation of a whale in your dreams represents a particular kind of experience into the depths of dream space and dream time that you normally might not be able to recall. So when you see this symbol in your dreams, you can be assured that a particular part of your consciousness engaged in activity that allowed you to dive deeper into dream time than you might have before. And this would be a reminder, a trigger. If you notice this, then look for various things during that day and perhaps even prior to that day and a few days after. Some particular streams of thoughts that may find their way into your awareness that can open your eyes to concepts that previously might have escaped you. And perhaps you needed a certain kind of environment and you needed a way to get into that environment to explore those subject matters. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, we should also mention that everyone will have their particulars if they recall whales in their dreams, but in general, this can be understood that way. And the day or the days prior and after can lead you to perceive, say, a different kind of intuitive experience. Your mind may wander into deeper subject matters of what you might just call metaphysics or philosophy. So when you notice this, pay particular attention. Perhaps prior to it, you might have brushed off something. So this might alert you. It would be a good indication that you're venturing deeper into the nature of self, into the nature of the universe.
Yeah, and I was almost wondering if we wanted to make an intention to explore that, whether prior maybe going to bed, if somebody was to kind of imagine themselves or almost like a daydream of imagining themselves being the whale and diving into those depths and what that experience might be like, whether that would
Indeed,
help them get connected with that particular dream body.
it might indeed. And we should also mention that whales have much bigger brains than human beings. And of course, they also have, or some of them also have much larger bodies. But that might also be another symbol for heightened intelligence that can be activated in those particular dream experiences, which eventually can flow over into your conscious reality. Now, it doesn't mean that you will suddenly become a 10th level mental genius overnight, but it does indicate that there are other functions to your intelligence that you might not be utilizing. You see, most human beings utilize their intelligence to, how do we say, to manage their struggles and traumas. So their intelligence in this way is more or less fixed, locked up. They might not even be able to afford themselves the luxury of thinking outside their particular trauma box because they are preoccupied in surviving. They are in survival mode. So then certain portions of the intelligence is cornered off. Just like in some homes, if for the winter you are not utilizing some of the rooms, you simply shut them down. So in some ways, this affects your intelligence. So by recognizing this as well and seeking to break down the barriers of that which has constrained you, where you have simply developed strategies to survive instead of existing and having a full on loving life, then you can start to break those barriers, recognize them, and watch yourself flourish. So it is another very nice little affectation, if you like. Many, many people have amazing, tremendous dream experiences. But because often dreams are considered simply the result of having eaten some bad cheese, you do not pay any attention. Even up until about 15 to 20 years ago, dreams were a big part of the conscious creation metaphysical community. Then came what you call conscious creation. All you have to do is think pretty thoughts, click your heels, and all the wonders of the universe will literally throw themselves at your feet. You can have anything you want. You want all the money in the world? Ask for it. So the true means of growing your spiritual life were now tossed aside because now the idea is, oh, we don't need spiritual well-being. We just need material well-being. And we will double down on this as a means to fix ourselves. That has resulted in very little fixing and also resulted in more need to dig deeper into the self as the source of well-being and not finances and fine cars. Does that make some sense? And yes, right now we are being critical of some aspects of that kind of conscious creation, but justly so. The true source of your well-being is not going to be a bigger bank account. And this has been demonstrated with many studies now. In fact, the bigger the bank account, the more worries and the less secure you feel. Whilst the original idea was if you have all the money in the world, you will be very nice and secure and safe. The opposite occurs. So return to the roots. Look at your inner self. Look at the source of your creation. That is the mechanisms you use to process thoughts and energy, meaning your mind. And if your mind is a wild horse, don't expect it to carry you to your destination. A wild horse will not do that. But a horse that has actually been shown its potential in a managed environment will take you to your desired destination. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and as you were talking about the conscious creation and the money, um, it it comes to the word that was coming to mind while you were speaking was abundance, and the money can be perhaps a representation or a metaphor of that, but I think the true connection comes from being connected to our inner self and our soul and our being, and that's the source of that particular abundance, and then it's going to show up in innumerable kind of ways, not limited to funds.
Indeed. In fact, if you allow for this to occur, abundance will show itself in numerous ways. Your gratitude may know no bounds. And in that way, financial abundance does show up, not the other way around, not by forcing it, not by doubling down, I want, I want, I want. Because when you do, I want, I want, I want, you are stating that you do not have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the beauty of the process is that you have the most incredible mechanism in the universe at your disposal. You call it the mind. When you manage it properly, when you actually use it in a way that is beneficial, it complies. But if you use it as if somehow or other it was your enemy, it also complies. It only does what you tell it to do. And not in a militant fashion, but in a cooperative fashion, in a collaborative fashion. In such a simple way, such as working with your dreams, you can begin to understand yourself far more than you would ever believe possible. We have said on Monday night that all of you are scientists. All of you are studying yourself as the subject matter. This may give you more insights into your own thinking, into your own beliefs, into your own nature than anything else. And in doing so, you lay down a foundation of discovering your own inner truth as almost mandatory in a fashion, but in a loving, mandatory way, that your ideas, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, all the intangibles, these are the tools and resources that mold, shape, and create your experience. So that becomes an incredibly powerful, potent ally in your quest for self-discovery. We spoke with a young couple many years ago in Arizona that became enamored with conscious creation, but in a very narrow fashion. They became convinced that all they had to do is keep buying lottery tickets, and that one day they will be lucky enough to hit the jackpot, even though they couldn't afford to buy enough food or to pay for most of their utilities. They became almost obsessed with this. And we offered a bitter peel, suggesting that instead they put that dream aside and focus upon their necessities and express gratitude for what they have now so that they will be satisfied. From that point on, then you can venture outwardly. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and the key word for me that I've come to discover is gratitude for the present moment, which I think is something that you were getting at.
Indeed. Once this particular alchemical transformation occurs in the mind, you begin to see that, in fact, you can be grateful for everything that you perceive. And first and foremost, for yourself. You may express gratitude for your friends and your family, your coworkers, and this and that, but you may dump on yourself instead. But if you include yourself in that act of gratitude, then you begin to change. You actually become aware that you are a blessed individual. And not necessarily by an outside agency or an alien being, but instead by the deepest nature that you have awareness of your own self, that can actually make quite an impact in the way you perceive your world. We didn't say perceive the world, your world. And that is an important distinction because it is always your world. There is no the world in those terms. It is your world. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, and my mind just keeps coming back to that idea of abundance and gratitude. You could keep waiting for that bank account, but you already have, a nice nature walk, or perhaps a pet, or a loved one you had a conversation with, or and those are all truly amazing things to be grateful for. But many of those things don't cost very little or of anything, in terms of
Indeed.
monetary being.
And it has been pointed out by many people that are still conscious, but on the edge of passing away. They don't care how much money they had in the bank or the big car they had or all the vacations or the trips to the moon. They most fondly remember the memories they created with people they loved, the memories they made, even if it is sometimes a little acidic. They still made a memory, but they remember the times that they had and what it meant to them. They don't reminisce about the big bank account, the big award they won. To them, that is secondary. So if you began to apply that today in your living, you might have an even greater impact on yourself. See, it is not the things happening out there, the events happening there, the conditions going on over here that actually influence you. You are the most influential person in your life. Why? Because you converse with yourself day in, day out. Certainly in your living, say you meet a famous person, you might have an interaction, you might somehow or other feel influence, but ultimately, you are the one that influences yourself because you may just brush off what they said, or you may decide this is something to think about. So you are doing the influencing. Does that make sense as well?
Yeah, it does, Chris, and I'm aware that I think we're getting towards the end of an episode, so I think we got some great stuff to perhaps continue into the next too.
Indeed. Then we will take a little break.
Thank you very much.